The bells of Drathmoor tolled with the weight of iron, their voices echoing through the stone labyrinth of streets that climbed toward the temple citadel. Every note was a command, every vibration a reminder. Kneel, obey, endure. Smoke from the forges mingled with incense drifting from sanctuaries, veiling the city in a shroud of sanctified grime. Even the light that reached Drathmoor's heart was dim, pale and cold as if filtered through ash. Beneath the shadow of a colossal statue, a chained figure kneeling before a serpent-headed throne, walked Father Nareth, once a priest of the Binding Creed. His robes, once white as winter marble, were now grayed and stiff from years of neglect. He kept his hood low, not to avoid the rain, but the eyes of those who still believed. The faithful spat prayers as he passed, not out of reverence but fear. Drathmoor's faith was no longer a beacon, it was a lash. The city itself was a monument to obedience. Iron rings embedded in walls held the remains of old processions. Chains melted into masonry, symbols of devotion made literal. Every district was bound by its tithe, every soul marked by the temple's seal. The priests spoke of freedom through servitude, of salvation through surrender, and the people nodded because dissent had become a forgotten tongue. Father Nareth's steps led him toward the riverfront, where the waters of the Narnin ran black from the forges upstream. There, beneath the bridge of penitence, beggars gathered to pray for scraps of consecrated bread. He knelt among them, his lips moving without sound. Prayer had long since lost meaning to him. It was an echo of habit, a whisper of guilt. He still remembered the day he stopped believing. It was during the Feast of Chains, when the High Abbot unveiled the relic said to hold a drop of the Dread Father's ichor. The crowd had screamed in ecstasy as the relic was lifted high, and Nareth had seen not a god's presence, but the blood of slaves who died forging the idol's cage. He had seen the god of domination smiling through mortal cruelty. That was the day his faith cracked. Now as he gazed at the cathedral that crowned Drathmoor, its spires shaped like hooked blades, he wondered how long before the entire city broke as he had. The walls seemed to lean inward, pressing upon its own heart, as if the stones themselves longed to kneel. A commotion stirred the air. A procession of penitents approached from the main road, men and women bound together with crimson chains, their backs flayed open to reveal the sigils of their devotion. At their center walked the new High Confessor, his mask wrought from polished iron. His voice, amplified by enchantment, rolled through the square like thunder. Through chains we are made pure, through suffering sanctified. The crowd roared in reply, some in fervor, others in terror. And in that sea of faces, Father Nareth saw a flicker of something else: pity, confusion, doubt. A child, clutching her mother's hand, looked at the bound penitents, not with awe, but horror. The sight pierced him deeper than any sermon. When the bells tolled again, he turned away. His path took him down narrow alleys where the holy patrols did not tread. There, in the damp silence of forgotten shrines, the air hummed with whispers. Heretics, prophets, thieves of truth. Somewhere beneath the cobblestones, a different faith was breathing again. He paused before a cracked wall, where an ancient carving half buried in grime caught the torchlight, a circle of broken links. Beneath it, a single phrase had been scratched in haste: "The prayer awaits." For the first time in years, Father Nareth felt something stir within him. Not faith, not yet, but hunger. Night in Drathmoor was a slow drowning. The fog rose from the river like pale smoke, winding through alleys and archways, until the city seemed to breathe in muffled whispers. The bells had fallen silent, but the echo of their toll lingered in the bones. Somewhere far above, the chained statue of the Dread Father stared down through the mist, its obsidian eyes catching the faint flicker of torchlight below. Father Nareth walked with his hood drawn low, his feet tracing paths only the desperate remembered. Beneath the old southern quarter lay the catacombs of St. Veredin, once a holy resting place, now a refuge for outcasts and blasphemers. To reach them was to vanish from the light of law. To descend was to court damnation. But Nareth's soul had already been weighed and found wanting. The entrance was hidden behind a ruined chapel whose altar had been cleaved in two, its marble face scarred by fire. He found the mark, two intersecting circles carved into the stone doorframe, the sign of the heretics. With a deep breath, he pushed the slab aside, and the cold air of the underworld embraced him. The catacombs were alive with dripping echoes and the scent of burnt tallow. Candles, hundreds of them, lined the narrow halls, their flames guttering against damp stone. Shadows danced like ghosts of forgotten saints. Figures cloaked in rough cloth watched as he passed, their faces veiled, their prayers whispered in tongues older than empire. At the far end of the chamber sat a woman before a single candle, its flame unnaturally steady despite the draught. Her skin bore the pale hue of those who had not seen the sun in years, and her eyes shimmered like molten brass. "How you walk heavy, priest," she said softly, "the kind of heaviness that comes from trying to drag your faith through the mire." Nareth knelt, though he could not tell if it was respect or exhaustion that drove him to his knees. "They told me you could speak of the prayer." A slow smile touched her lips. "They told you truth then?" She gestured toward the candle between them. "This flame is the first light kindled from the ashes of the temple's own altars. Every flicker above ground is a lie, bound by the chains of devotion. But this is the light that refuses to kneel." Nareth stared at the flame. Its heart burned with a strange hue, blue edged with silver, like starlight trapped in wax. "And the prayer?" he asked. Her gaze deepened. "It is not a plea to a god, priest. It is a weapon forged from despair. The words were written in the time before chains, when faith was still a choice. Speak them, and the god of bondage will bleed. But to utter them is to offer your soul as the wound." Silence gathered around them. The candles seemed to lean closer. Nareth's pulse drummed like distant war drums. "You've seen the city," she continued. "You've felt its breath upon your neck. Every lash, every sermon, every tithe, all of it feeds him. And yet, the people still bow. The prayer is the last act of defiance left to us, the last breath before the end." Nareth's voice trembled. "Why tell me this? I am no savior." "Because the gods do not fear saviors," she said, standing. "They fear believers who have stopped believing." From her sleeve, she withdrew a small shard of obsidian, etched with runes that pulsed faintly as if alive. "This will find its way to the altar when the time comes. But beware, the Inquisition already searches. One among them listens for whispers in the dark. His name is Arthur." The air thickened, as though the shadows themselves were eavesdropping. When Nareth rose to leave, the woman's candle flared high, flooding the catacomb in blue light. For an instant, the walls seemed to breathe, the carved saints twisting their faces away from the glow. Above ground, the bells began again. And in that moment, Nareth knew the city had already begun to stir. The dawn broke red over Drathmoor, not with warmth, but with warning. Smoke drifted from the western quarter where the forges never slept, and the air tasted of iron and incense, a mingling of worship and war. From the high spire of the inquisitorial bastion, Arthur watched the light crawl across the city's scars. Each district, each shackle-shaped street, lay obedient beneath the gaze of the temple. Yet beneath that obedience, he sensed movement. Something restless, something unchained. Arthur was a man of silence and discipline, his armor etched with the glyphs of purity. The chains embroidered on his cloak gleamed faintly in the morning haze. Around his neck hung the sigil of his order, a circle of thorns enclosing a bleeding sun. To most, it marked him as the hand of the faith. To Arthur, it was a reminder of every heretic burned beneath his watch. Every scream still followed him, coiling in his thoughts like smoke he could not breathe away. He turned from the window as Captain Nareth entered, helm under one arm, face pale from sleeplessness. "Another gathering beneath the southern ruins," Nareth said. "Whispers of forbidden prayers. Some claim to have seen a priest among them." Arthur's jaw tightened. "A priest?" "Yes, Inquisitor. One of our own." The words struck like a hammer. Arthur dismissed the captain with a gesture, but his thoughts churned. A priest among heretics, an apostate wearing holy robes. The rumor could not be ignored, yet the faint ember of something, curiosity, perhaps guilt, glowed within him. He descended into the Hall of Records, where the stone walls were carved with the confessions of the damned. Each line was a testament to the faith's reach. As he walked, the torches guttered, casting the carved words into flickering relief. I believed and was broken. I broke and was blessed. At the end of the hall awaited the mirror of witness, an artifact said to reveal the stain of sin upon any soul that gazed into it. He had avoided it for years, but today he lingered. The surface shimmered like black water. Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet his reflection, and saw not his face but the faces of those he had condemned. Men, women, children, all burning in spectral silence. He closed his eyes, but the images clung like cobwebs. "You hesitate," came a voice behind him. It was the High Confessor, robed in crimson, his mask shaped like the god's chained visage. "Doubt is a serpent, Arthur. Do not let it coil too tightly." "I do not doubt," Arthur lied. "I seek understanding." "Understanding is the seed of heresy," the Confessor hissed. "Root it out before it blooms." When the Confessor's steps receded, Arthur remained alone. The mirror's surface had stilled, but beneath it, for the briefest moment, he thought he saw movement. A flicker of blue light, faint and defiant, like a candle burning where no light should be. By dusk, the Inquisitor rode into the southern quarter. The streets here were narrow, choked with refuse and prayer etchings drawn in soot. Children scattered at his approach, every door closed before him. He found the ruins of the chapel half swallowed by moss and decay, its altar split as if by a blade of divine wrath. There, amid the dust and silence, he found a mark scratched into the wall, a circle of broken links. He traced it with a gloved finger, feeling the faint pulse of power beneath the stone. A tremor stirred the air, and in its wake came a whisper. Not from any living mouth, but from the city itself. "The prayer awaits." Arthur drew his sword, though he knew steel was useless against what he felt then. A presence vast and ancient, rising beneath Drathmoor's foundations. The wind hissed through the broken archway like laughter. He looked toward the cathedral on the hill, its spires catching the dying light. For the first time in years, Arthur wondered whether his god truly heard the prayers he crushed into obedience, or whether the god only feasted upon the crushing itself. In the gathering dark, the Inquisitor bowed his head, not in prayer, in fear. The night came heavy with storm. Thunder rolled across the sky like drums of judgment, and the rain fell in sheets so thick the streets ran with black water and ash. Drathmoor's towers vanished behind veils of lightning and smoke, and the bells, those ceaseless iron hearts, had gone still. The silence between the thunderclaps was a kind of breath, waiting to be released. In the crypt beneath the shattered chapel, Father Nareth stood once more before the heretic's flame. The woman with eyes of brass was gone, only the candle remained burning with its steady blue fire. The air smelled of old stone, blood, and salt. Around him, the last disciples of the catacombs had gathered, men and women wrapped in rags and conviction. The faint echo of chanting carried through the passageways like wind through broken chains. "The city burns," one whispered. "The Inquisition scours the streets." Nareth looked to the flame. "Then we begin before they arrive." He laid the shard of obsidian upon the floor, the one given to him in the catacombs. It pulsed faintly, each beat echoing the rhythm of his heart. The runes etched upon it began to glow as he knelt, murmuring the words that had haunted his dreams since the night he first heard them. The prayer of unbinding. It was not a supplication, not even a curse. It was a remembering of the time before gods demanded worship, before mortals learned to bow. The syllables crawled from his tongue like smoke, thick and ancient, reshaping the air around him. The candle's flame bent low, then rose, splitting into a dozen pale threads that wound upward like serpents of light. One by one, the others joined him. Their voices formed a chorus, rough yet rising in strange harmony. The stones trembled. Chains embedded in the walls rattled and cracked. From deep within the city, there came a grinding roar, as though the earth itself were dragging its fetters across the abyss. And far above, in the temple citadel, the High Confessor stirred. He stood before the great idol of the Dread Father, the chained god whose eyes of onyx glowed with inner fire. The floor quivered beneath his feet, and through the stone he felt it, a pulse, alien and furious. The prayer was being spoken. "Blasphemy," he whispered. "Unthinkable blasphemy." But even as he shouted orders, he heard the voice, not mortal, not divine, something in between. It rose through the foundations, through the shrines and crypts and flesh of the city itself, a sound that did not echo, because it was the echo of all prayers ever chained to silence. Arthur heard it too. He had been scouring the ruins, blade drawn, when the first tremor struck. The sigil of his order burned against his chest, but the fire was cold. He followed the resonance down into the catacombs, through twisting corridors and veils of dust, until the world seemed to hum with a single living note. He found Nareth in the center of the chamber, kneeling amid the storm of light. The obsidian shard had cracked open, and from within poured a torrent of brilliance, neither fire nor water, but something that burned without heat, that sang without sound. "Nareth!" Arthur's voice broke. "Stop this madness!" The priest turned toward him, eyes alight with the reflection of the unholy flame. "You came because you doubt, Inquisitor. Let your doubt be the doorway." The air rippled. Chains coiled through the walls began to melt like wax. From the fissures in the stone poured a voice vast and ancient, shuddering the bones of all who heard it. "I am the God you made when you forgot yourselves," it said, "and I am ending now." Arthur staggered. The ground split beneath him, and the cry of the dying city filled the catacombs. Towers above collapsed in fire and lightning, and the statue of the Dreadfather shattered into 1,000 shrieking fragments. Nareth's body arched, his mouth still forming the final words of the prayer. The light surged outward in a wave that tore through the temple and beyond, rising toward the storm-split heavens. For an instant, the chains of Drathmoor glowed white-hot, and then snapped. When the light faded, there was only the rain falling on ruins. The candle had guttered out. The obsidian shard lay in silence, broken into dust. Arthur knelt where Nareth had been. The priest was gone. Only the faint scent of smoke remained, sweet like incense but strange like freedom. And in the silence that followed, Arthur did what he had not done in years. He prayed, not to the god of bondage, not to any god at all. He prayed to the emptiness, and the emptiness listened. Dawn came to Drathmoor for the first time in an age, not the pale, filtered glow that crept through smog and incense, but true light, golden, sharp, alive. It poured across the ruined spires and smoking courtyards, filling every crack where shadow had reigned. Yet there was no rejoicing. The city lay still, its breath spent, its chains shattered. The air smelled of lightning and wet stone, of something new and unnameable. The temple citadel was a carcass of marble and ash. Where once the statue of the Dreadfather loomed, there was only an empty dais cracked and blackened. The sigils of servitude carved into the walls had melted like wax, their shapes running down into meaningless streaks. And upon the altar, beneath a shaft of pale sunlight, knelt Arthur, his armor broken, his hands raw from dragging himself through the wreckage. He had searched all night for Nareth's body, but found nothing. Only the shattered remnants of the obsidian shard and the faint trace of warmth on the stones, as though something divine or defiant had passed through. Around him, the dead and the living were indistinguishable. The faithful lay beside heretics, inquisitors beside beggars, their faces calm in the stillness after terror. For a long time he could not move. He listened instead, to the silence where once the bells had rung, to the wind sighing through the empty spires. The sound was neither grief nor peace. It was something older, the breathing of a world freed from its own voice. By midday, the survivors began to gather. From the markets, from the catacombs, from the broken forges and flooded streets, they came slowly, blinking at the unfamiliar sky. No one gave orders. No one knelt. They simply stood among the ruins, as if afraid that speaking would wake the god they had slain. A woman stepped forward, one of the heretics of the underground. Her robes were scorched, her hair streaked with soot, but her eyes held that same molten gleam Nareth had once seen in the candlelight. She looked at Arthur. "It's done," she said softly. "He's gone." Arthur's voice came out a rasp. "And what are we, now that he is gone?" She glanced at the horizon where the sun burned unchained across the clouds. "We are unbound, that is all. It will be enough." But Arthur felt the hollow in his chest widen. The prayer had freed them from their God, but faith had been the marrow of their lives. Without it, what would they become? He looked upon the people, some weeping, some staring at the sky in awe, some kneeling still from habit, and saw not triumph, but the fragile birth of uncertainty. He rose at last, walking among the dead. At the base of the dais, he found the last remnant of the old faith, a chain half buried in ash, its links glowing faintly from the heat of their unmaking. He touched it, and for a heartbeat he heard the whisper again, not a command this time, but a question faint as dying embers. "Will you forge new chains, Arthur, or will you learn to walk without them?" He let the chain fall. It sank into the dust and was gone. Outside, the river Narlin ran clear for the first time in centuries, its waters reflecting a sky no longer smothered by smoke. Children played among the ruins, their laughter sharp and strange against the silence. Birds, real birds, not the steel effigies once kept in cages above the temple, circled the towers that still stood. Life, raw and unshaped, was returning. Arthur watched them until the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the streets. Then he turned from the city and began to walk, toward the mountains, toward whatever lay beyond the faith that had ruled his world. Behind him, the bells of Drathmoor, silent since the night of the storm, rang once more. Not by hands nor by command, but by the wind itself passing through their hollow throats like a prayer never meant for gods. And thus ended the City of Chains.